The 2nd of February, 1943, Stalingrad, the Soviet Union. The German Sixth Army, after 5 months of fierce fighting and heavy casualties, having exhausted their ammunition and food, finally capitulates, making it the first of Hitler's field armies to surrender during World War II. The battle for the city proves a decisive psychological turning point, ending a string of German victories in the summer of 1942 and beginning the long retreat westward. The Soviet army remains on the offensive, and in July 1944, liberates Majdanek, the first major Nazi camp to be liberated, on the territory of German-occupied Poland. Soviet officials invite journalists to inspect the camp and to see for themselves the evidence of the horrors that had occurred there. As Allied and Soviet troops move across Europe against Nazi Germany in 1944 and 1945, they encounter concentration camps, mass graves, and other sites of Nazi crimes. The unspeakable conditions the liberators confront shed light on the full scope of Nazi horrors. One of the most infamous perpetrators of this criminal Nazi regime responsible for these atrocities is Max Koegel. Otto Max Koegel was born on the 16th of October, 1895, in Füssen, then part of the German Empire. He was the 4th son of a carpenter who worked at a local furniture factory. Shortly before his 6th birthday, Koegel's mother died from complications during childbirth. In 1907, his father died, and Max was sent to live with a family at a nearby farm. He also had to leave school and began training as a shepherd and later worked as a mountain guide. The First World War began on the 28th of July, 1914, and Koegel volunteered to join the Bavarian infantry. During the war, he was wounded 3 times, including once during the Battle of Verdun, which was one of the longest and deadliest battles of the war. The German army attempted an offensive near the French city of Verdun that quickly devolved into a stalemate. German forces were subsequently diverted from Verdun when the British launched the Battle of the Somme, and the Battle of Verdun ended in December when the French recaptured the initial German gains. About 300,000 soldiers were killed, and many more were wounded. Before the First World War ended, on the 11th of November, 1918, Koegel had reached the rank of corporal and received the Iron Cross Second Class. After the war, he returned to Bavaria and worked as a customs clerk. In 1920, he left the civil service and opened a souvenir shop. However, 4 years later he filed for bankruptcy after he was charged with fraud, for which he received a suspended sentence. He then traveled for work to Switzerland and Austria before returning to Füssen, where he obtained a job in his father's old furniture factory. During this time, he joined the Völkischer Bund and Bund Oberland, both extreme nationalist and anti-Semitic organizations. In 1929, Koegel's 8-year-old son died from measles, and a short time later his marriage of 10 years ended in divorce. Adolf Hitler and his Nazi party came into power in Germany on the 30th of January 1933. By this time, Koegel was already a member of the Nazi Party and the SS, both of which he had joined 1 year earlier. Immediately after Hitler came into power, Germany became a dictatorship, and the Nazi regime quickly began to restrict the civil and human rights of the Jews and established the first concentration camps, imprisoning its political opponents, homosexuals, Jehovah's Witnesses, and others classified as dangerous. The first concentration camp, Dachau, was established in March 1933, less than 2 months after Hitler became the Chancellor. It was at Dachau where in 1937, Max Koegel began his concentration camp career as an adjutant to Hans Loritz, then Dachau's Commandant. Thanks to his drive and ambition, Koegel rose rapidly through the ranks. The first prisoner transports arrived in the camp on the 22nd of March 1933. In October of the same year, Dachau's Commandant, Theodor Eicher, introduced a system of regulations which inflicted brutal punishments on the prisoners for the slightest offenses. Eicher ensured that the Dachau camp served as a model for all later concentration camps. It also became a training center or a school of violence for SS guards who were deployed throughout the concentration camp system. During the first year, the camp had a capacity of 5,000 prisoners. Initially, the internees were primarily German communists, social democrats, trade unionists, and other political opponents of the Nazi regime. However, over time, other groups were also interned at Dachau, such as Jehovah's Witnesses, Roma and Sinti people, homosexuals, repeat criminal offenders, as well as so-called asocials, whom the regime incarcerated because they could not or would not find gainful employment. The number of Jewish prisoners at Dachau rose with the increased persecution of Jews. On the 10th and 11th of November 1938, in the aftermath of the Kristallnacht, when Jewish homes, businesses, synagogues, hospitals and schools were ransacked by the Nazi SA and German civilians, almost 11,000 Jewish men were interned there. Most of the men in this group were released after incarceration of a few weeks to a few months, many after proving that they had made arrangements to emigrate from Germany. In 1938, Max Koegel became a managing director at the women's labor camp at Ravensbrück at the rank of Sturmbannführer, which was equivalent to major. The Second World War began on the 1st of September 1939, when Germany invaded Poland. Nazi Germany possessed overwhelming military superiority over Poland. Germany launched the unprovoked attack at dawn on the 1st of September with an advanced force consisting of more than 2,000 tanks, supported by nearly 900 bombers and over 400 fighter planes. In all, Germany deployed 60 divisions and nearly 1.5 million men in the invasion. The assault on Poland demonstrated Germany's ability to combine air power and armor in a new kind of mobile warfare. The world adopted a new term to describe Germany's successful war tactic: Blitzkrieg, or Lightning War. The last operational Polish unit surrendered on the 6th of October. After Poland's defeat in early October 1939, Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union divided the country in accordance with a secret protocol to the German-Soviet Non-Aggression Pact. Very soon, the Nazis started opening up new concentration camps on the territory of German-occupied Poland, and one of them was Majdanek, near Lublin. In 1942, Koegel was transferred from Ravensbrück to Majdanek and became its commandant. In order to increase efficiency in the mass murder of the Jews and other undesirable enemies of the state, one of his tasks as the camp commandant was the installation of gas chambers. Very soon, camp authorities began to use Zyklon B gas to murder prisoners too weak to work in a makeshift gas chamber. Mass murder operations using poison gas began at Majdanek in October 1942 and continued until the end of 1943. There appear to have been 3 gas chambers at Majdanek. At least 2 were shower rooms reconfigured for the use of Zyklon B gas. At least one of these 2 was used to kill human beings. The SS killed tens of thousands of Jews at Majdanek. Most of them arrived in the camp as forced laborers, and either died as a result of the brutally inhumane living conditions or were killed in the gas chambers after the Germans determined that they could no longer work. Majdanek's gas chambers were also used to kill prisoners from other camps in Lublin who were no longer able to work. Some Jewish victims were killed in the gas chambers upon arrival. However, many were killed in shooting operations, and many others died of disease, starvation, exposure, and overwork. When the Soviet army liberated the camp on the 24th of July, 1944, it was virtually intact, and only a few hundred Jewish prisoners remained alive. Soviet officials invited journalists to inspect the camp and see the evidence of the horrors that had occurred there. Between 80 to 120,000 people perished in Majdanek between October 1941 and July 1944, when the camp was operational. When the Soviet army liberated Majdanek, Max Koegel was serving as a commandant of Flossenburg concentration camp, a position he had been given from April 1943. Flossenburg's original purpose was to exploit the forced labor of prisoners to produce granite for Nazi construction projects. Until mid-1943, when the camp became a key supplier of Messerschmitt Bf 109 aircraft parts, the quarry occupied the labor of about half the prisoner population. The conditions under which the camp authorities forced the prisoners to work, and the absence of even rudimentary medical care, facilitated the spread of disease, including dysentery and typhus. In addition, the Germans created such harsh living conditions for the prisoners that they often committed suicide. The camp's Nazi personnel would often carry out executions, punish the prisoners with whipping, and order long and extremely tiring roll calls. The camp commandant Max Koegel tolerated these atrocities. On the 6th of June, 1944, under the codename Operation Overlord, US, British, and Canadian troops crossed the English Channel and landed on the beaches of Normandy in France. This operation became known as D-Day and was the largest amphibious invasion in history, deploying more than 160,000 Allied troops on air, land, and sea. 50,000 vehicles, some 5,000 naval craft, and more than 11,500 aircraft supported the initial invasion. This largest seaborne invasion in history marked a turning point in World War II and became the beginning of the end of the war in Europe. To rescue Germany from catastrophic defeat brought about by Adolf Hitler's increasingly irrational management of the war, several groups in the German resistance decided to assassinate Hitler. On the 20th of July, 1944, a young staff officer, Lieutenant Colonel Klaus von Stauffenberg, placed one of the two bombs in a briefcase under the table in Hitler's briefing room in the Wolf's Lair. However, he was unable to arm the second bomb in time, and after Stauffenberg left the room, the briefcase was coincidentally moved under the heavy support of the table leg. It detonated, but failed to kill Hitler. In the days that followed, Hitler ordered a massive hunt for conspirators, which continued for months. Some of the conspirators, directly or indirectly involved in the plot, included Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a German theologian and pastor, Hans Oster, a German military officer and key figure in the resistance against the Nazis, and Wilhelm Canaris, a German admiral and the chief of the Abwehr, the German military intelligence service. All three conspirators were arrested by the Gestapo and subsequently brutally interrogated and tortured. They were brought to Flossenburg concentration camp, and in a sham trial, presided by Max Koegel, they were sentenced to death, and on the 9th of April, 1945, they were hanged. As the US forces approached the camp in mid-April 1945, Koegel ordered the forced evacuation of prisoners, except those unable to walk, from the Flossenburg camp. Between the 15th and 20th of April, the SS moved most of the remaining 9,300 prisoners in the main camp, reinforced by about 7,000 prisoners who had arrived in Flossenburg from Buchenwald in the direction of Dachau, both on foot and by train. Around 7,000 of these prisoners died en route, either from exhaustion or starvation, or because the SS guards shot them when they could no longer keep up the pace. During the march, Koegel instructed the mayors of the nearby towns to bury the inmates who had been shot on the side of the road or died of starvation and exhaustion. However, thousands of inmates escaped, were liberated by advancing US troops, or found themselves free when the SS guards deserted during the night. Fewer than 3,000 of those who left Flossenburg main camp arrived in Dachau, where they joined some 3,800 prisoners from the Flossenburg subcamps. When the US forces liberated Flossenburg on the 23rd of April, 1945, just over 1,500 prisoners remained in the camp. As many as 200 of them died after liberation. Nearly 97,000 prisoners passed through the Flossenburg system between 1938 and 1945. An estimated 30,000 prisoners died in Flossenburg and its subcamps, or on the evacuation routes, including 3,515 Jews. After the war, Max Koegel went on the run and initially managed to evade arrest. However, in June 1946, he was arrested by US occupation forces in Bavaria and then sent to a prison in Schwabach. The next day, on the 27th of June, 1946, Koegel, then 50 years old, committed suicide by hanging himself. Koegel, who was in his position responsible for the murder of hundreds of thousands of people, never faced justice for his crimes. There were no tears shed for Max Koegel. Thanks for watching the World History channel. Be sure to like and subscribe, and click the bell notification icon so you don't miss our next episodes. We thank you, and we'll see you next time on the channel.